I'm missing a little part of my brain that stops me from being compersive.
Liam's like, if I'm chatting with someone or like, dating someone, Liam's like, oh my gosh, can you two, what if you go on a little holiday together?
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? Like,
Yeah.
when am I going on this holiday? Like, for how long? Liam's like, I don't know. Like, it doesn't have to be 2 or 3 nights, but my compersion's also, I feel like it's gets a bit weird. If we're going to get a little bit explicit here, like I do when I'm like alone by myself and I'm having my own,
paint us a
like
picture.
my own time where I'm, I'm with myself or whatever.
Okay.
It's very compersion led. Like I really enjoy imagining you with another woman. And then my compersion is not always what I would want it to be in reality.
Hi everyone, welcome to Polycurious. I am Fair, relationship coach and your host. And today I'm talking to my friends Abbey and Liam from the Evolving Love Project. Now, you might remember them from episode 42 of the podcast, where we talked about their journey being poly parents. And I will make sure to link it in the show notes in case you want to check that out. You might also be familiar with them from their own podcast, the Evolving Love podcast, where I was actually recently a guest. And we talked about my monopoly relationship with Seth, as well as how Liam and I met a few years ago through Field, actually, and how we went on a first date, but we were unable to go on a second date because of some feelings that came up for Abby. So if you want to hear the whole gossip, you can go and listen to that episode. I also added the link in the show notes. But Abby and Liam not only have a podcast, Abby has a Substack where she writes beautifully about motherhood, about non-monogamy, about sexuality. And the two of them have become public figures in Australia where they live. And what I really appreciate about them, and a way in which I think that we are similar in our approaches to non monogamy and educating the public about it, is that they understand that non monogamy is nuance and that everyone does it a little bit different. And that as long as everyone is being respected and there's consent, there's nothing wrong with doing things in a certain way that might be different from what you hear in online discourses. And one of the things we talk about today is asymmetry. I think that one of the misconceptions people have is that in order for relationships to be fair, they need to be equal in the sense that both partners need to be doing the same. And Abby and Liam talk about how at the beginning of their relationship, when they first opened up, Abby actually dated on her own for about 2 years before Liam ventured to do that himself. During that time, they were having experiences together as well. And the reason why they made that decision is because Liam found it really hard for Abby to go on dates. So he was actually benefiting from it as well. And eventually, Abby also became more comfortable with Liam going on solo dates. And that's just one example of how you don't have to have the exact same rules as your partner as long as everyone in the dynamic feels comfortable with whatever is happening. And Abby and Liam are one of those really lucky people that experience arousal when thinking of their partner being with someone else. I think the majority of people, including myself, experience perhaps jealousy. At best, you might feel neutral, but it is rare for people to get excited about your partner being with other people. Maybe not so rare, let me say. I think there's a lot of people that perhaps don't want to admit it to themselves, and you might be one of them, and you might realize that if you were able to just accept that that's something that turns you on, you could have a beautiful exploration just like Abby and Liam. But even if you are not someone that experiences that, I think you'll find this episode interesting because we talk about whether that's something that you could work yourself up to. So I'm hoping that today, by listening to Abby and Liam, perhaps you can discover a little bit more about yourself. Now, as I mentioned in the conversation, if that's not you, if you do not feel aroused at all by the thought of your partner being with someone else, that's totally okay too. But if you do, you might find some inspiration from Abby and Liam. Abby and Liam, welcome to Polycurious. I'm so excited to have you back. And for listeners who haven't listened to your first episode and to the episode that I just did with you guys, they can find out there how we met, but basically through Field, when Liam was on a trip in New York, we went on a date, then Abby vetoed me.
Oh.
So there's some gossip for listeners out there, but we're not gonna go back to that because we want them to go and check out your episode and our episode together before that. But I'm so excited to be able to just have a conversation to get your full story, because even though I know you and you guys are friends, I don't actually really know what's up with your poly life, if you're even calling yourself poly. So I'm excited to dive in.
Yeah,
amazing.
Thank you so much for having us. We're excited to jump back on the microphones with you again.
Yeah, we always love chatting with you. So this is a real treat.
Let's start from the beginning with you guys. So I know that you've been together for over a decade. Is that right? Like maybe 12, 13 years? What is it?
Is that like 15 years or something now?
Yeah. We'll give you 15 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So when Liam and we met together at university. So we met at college, and we were very monogamous in the beginning. I feel like looking back at the early days of our relationship, our intensity sort of towards each other, we'd probably be considered a red flag now. We were definitely love bombing each other hard.
Very hard.
in the way that we fell for one another. And we have a very sweet falling in love story, basically. I was volunteering at the food co-op at the university that I was going to, and Liam was performing with his band that night, and they had this music night, and so there were lots of people there, and I was sitting there in the audience. And previous to that gig, I'd started having these, I know this sounds a little bit woo-woo, but I'd started having these dreams that I was going to meet someone, and you know, he was tall and had this like shaggy dark hair, and I mentioned it to my housemate, and it became this running joke with the housemates that, you know, I was going to meet this, you know, this guy with shaggy dark hair. I think perhaps maybe I did. And then I was sitting there in the audience with my housemate, and Liam started singing, and he was really looking at me, and I felt really connected to him. And I nudged my housemate and I said, "Oh, I think that's the guy from my dream," you know, and I was like winking, and we were sort of having a bit of a joke, and she was like, "You're crazy." And then after the gig, she said, "Oh, why don't you go and speak to him? You should go up." But I could see all of these other, you know, these girls were going up and chatting, you know, it's like post gig, you know, Liam was like smiling and chatting, and I was like, no, I'm not going to go up now. That's not my style. But, you know, I feel pretty secure that we're going to connect. And so I sent him a lovely message the next day on Facebook Messenger saying, "I saw your concert. I just wanted to wish you all the best for your creativity." And then Liam has an interesting version of this too.
Yeah, so it was quite incredible because, you know, I'd been out of a relationship for a few months. I was single. I was looking to date, and I remember I was standing on stage in the gig, and Abby was just kind of lit up with this amazing situation where all of the lights were focused on the stage, but there was one light that was broken in the roof. And that light, crazily enough, was shining right on Abby. So this whole performance, I spent about, you know, an hour just staring at Abby, being like, who is that beautiful woman in the audience?
So you were actually looking at her. That's what one of the questions I had.
Looking at her.
Yeah,
I was genuinely looking at her. And then I said to all the guys in my band, I said, look, there's this beautiful woman. I've got to try and find her after we finish. Can you guys pack up my gear so I can go and find her? So they start packing up all the gear. I go out into the audience. I get sidetracked talking to other people, and I try and find Abby, but she's nowhere to be seen. So sadly, too cool. She played it way too cool. So I go back to the band and say, I couldn't find her. And then, unbelievably, she slid into the DMs, and then from there it was a whirlwind romance.
Yes.
I love it. I mean, it almost sounds like the definition of love at first sight, if there's such a thing, right? Like you both experienced it. And it wasn't just love at first sight from one side. It was from both sides. And in a concert with a spotlight on Abby. You know what I mean? It almost sounds like it's a made up movie narrative, you know?
I know. It feels like a romantic comedy. It's sort of
Yeah, it was cinematic for
yeah,
sure.
definitely cinematic. And then from that point, we went on a date a week later, and we've just been like, we just locked into each other. So we've just been like a very connected couple, lots of playfulness and freedom and connecting, and like I said, love bombing. I still feel like after all of these years, we're still like have that level of intensity.
Still love bombing. Yeah.
But very monogamous. And, that was at first. We didn't start exploring non-monogamy for a couple of years in. I think at that point I'd sort of associated non-monogamy with like, that's like for unhappy people, or that's like, that's what people do, after they've been together for like 25 years and the spark is gone and there's like problems. That's what that's all about. And then at the end of 2013, Liam and I moved to New York City together from Canberra. And I feel like that is when our world just opened up. And I think it was actually moving to New York City, being exposed to so many different types of people and different ways of being, and just, everything felt very like cool. People were just exploring non-monogamy, and it was just like more in the culture. And then we were like really starting to explore sort of like kink and BDSM dynamics. So we had we had been doing that from pretty early on in our relationship, but I think that was really laying the foundation for trust, for getting to know each other, for vulnerability. Like that really connected us in, was actually exploring those sorts of dynamics. So then the topic of non-monogamy just came up really organically. We can't even remember whose idea it was. Can you remember who suggested?
No, I think it was just a classic pillow talk conversation. I think we were just discussing, I think initially because you're bisexual, the topic of maybe threesomes came up, and then naturally it just kind of evolved from there, I think.
Yeah, and it came from that place of excitement, of curiosity, and like a very sexually driven motivator, like for that. Like we weren't really thinking about polyamory. We weren't really thinking about like dating other people per se. It was just this sort of organic, like, it would be amazing to have this experience. If we had that experience, would you be jealous or would you be into it? And we both sort of found, that we were both very compersive. We were feeling compersion, but we didn't have any language for that. We didn't know what it meant, but we were just having a lot of fun with the fantasies of it. And then, I don't know, then situations just started arising.
Yeah. We started finding these. Initially, we had these kind of lofty ideals of what the perfect threesome would look like, but we didn't really know that many people. So Abby was at the time working at this hotel, and Abby was working with quite a few attractive. She had quite a few attractive colleagues, and so we'd say, "Oh, wouldn't it be amazing to, have a threesome with that colleague?" Or we were kind of going about it in just a totally bizarre way
We were like the classic sort of unicorn hunting, but like just talking about it with each other, but like had no framework around like if that's bad or good, or like just like blind, like just like
just running through the streets of New York City, just praying that this mythical unicorn would kind of eventuate.
We just really wanted to have a threesome. That's really how it started.
Yeah, and then amazingly, a colleague of Abby's kind of propositioned us. She must have kind of picked up what we were putting down.
I must have been putting the vibes out. Yeah.
Nice. Abby, you have a gift for manifesting. You were like, there's this man. And then you find Liam and you're like, oh, what if this colleague was into us and wanted a threesome? And then she's like, oh, actually, I am. But yeah, that sounds super exciting. And that's actually an aspect you guys know that because my partner is monogamous, I actually haven't really gotten to experience too much of play with a partner. And when I did with my secondary partner before we broke up, I had fun, but the first experience definitely brought up some feelings of jealousy and discomfort. And so it's different fantasizing about it than actually doing it. So what happened when and if, because it sounds like it did happen, when you actually did have that threesome with that coworker. Did the fantasy meet reality, or did you also struggle a little bit?
Oh, I mean, the fantasy definitely met reality for me. Well, it was something
too.
that, because we had talked about it so much, we actually already had a framework about what we were comfortable with. So we'd spoken about boundaries, and Abby, we'd both agreed that, we wouldn't have full penetrative sex. There would be like certain parameters around the experience, and we communicated that to this particular person, and she was like, "Yeah, of course, that's all good. Like, this is just a fun thing. Like, I'm very respectful of your boundaries." And so we went into it, and I think in the moment, the big lesson for us was the importance of not renegotiating the boundaries in the moment.
See, the thing is, and that's because I get really carried away, and I think you don't know how you're going to feel until you're in the situation. So I had sort of set these parameters around things based on what I had thought that I would be comfortable with. But when we were in the moment, I was like, oh, actually, I feel great. This is awesome. Let's like go all the way. Like, just all of those feelings. Like, I'm so like comfortable with this, genuinely so comfortable. And then Liam was actually the keeper of my boundaries. Like Liam was like, well, let's not rush. Like Liam's very considered, and I'm considered as well. But when I get excited, I can be like, oh, let's like go further. So Liam was like, let's just, we had like sort of made this array, like let's just keep what we had decided on. And I was like, okay, yep, fair enough. And I remember in the moment being like, oh, damn, it would, oh, okay. Like I felt a bit sort of, like I was being reined in, because I was like, my compersion's through the roof. Like you two go for it.
Yeah.
But I think the fact that Liam, even though we were in that moment, we're in that sort of that really heightened sexual state, Liam actually being steadfast and saying, we're not going to get carried away here, in the longer story of us, and, in the days after, and for, the non-monogamy going forward, it actually built a lot of trust and security with Liam for us to be exploring this, because he's not, like, you were very respectful of what my boundary had been, even though I was trying to renegotiate in the moment. And that came from a deep place of care for me. And just wanting to play it safe. And you've always been really good at playing things safe. And
I think about things in the long term. I think about it's not a race to the finish line. We weren't trying to go all the way and get as much experience out of that particular experience as possible. And I'm just so glad that we did that. And it was definitely an internal struggle. There was no shortage of excitement on my end, But
I was gonna say.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's a difficult thing in the moment, I think, but because we had that great experience where there was that level of restraint and respecting the boundaries, then moving forward, we knew that just instinctually was the best way for us to approach those situations. And every time after that we had different experiences, we did push the boundaries further from where we were. Like then suddenly it became.
Well, we adjusted them beforehand.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. So not in the moment, we didn't push the boundaries, but we kind of, leading up to it and with the partners that we were with, we kind of communicated those things.
Yeah. And we also, I think it was after that moment, and that was all wonderful, and that was such a positive experience. And I think a lot of that came down to my friendship with her and just who she was as a person. She was already a very open person. She'd been exploring non-monogamy before, so she had that level of experience. We were the newbies. But from that moment, we were like, actually, let's like look into this a little bit more. And I think that's when we started to look into non-monogamy and sort of found out about compersion, about, there's all these different ways of being in a relationship. It's, it's not just like you're monogamous, but some people have secret threesomes. Or like there's swinging. We sort of we started to educate ourselves more. So we started listening to podcasts. We were in New York, so we started to go to different talks and things that were happening.
Effie Blue.
Yeah, we started going to Effie Blue's talks
Hacienda.
At the Hacienda. And I think from then on, we were sort of more in that swinging space, or just more sexually led non-monogamy, like definitely not look like we weren't we weren't dating one-on-one or anything like that. That sort of came about, a number of years later. It was like mostly sort of shared experiences. Like we were going to sex parties together. We were, all of that.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. I think that what you mentioned about not changing the agreements halfway and even just having agreements before is so important, because I think that going back to the jealousy, I know that you are naturally compersive, and perhaps I'm not I'm not as naturally compersive as you guys are. But I also think that how jealous you get or how compersive you feel does have to do with how safe you feel, right? So I think what
Right.
happened to me when I had that threesome, and it was really just the first experience, the experiences we had after that with the same person were great, and even that one was great, right? That's the other thing, like you can feel jealousy and also be aroused and have fun and all of that. But I think the issue with that was that because it was with my secondary partner, not with my primary partner, I was like, oh, we don't need agreements and aftercare and whatever, right? So then I think what was hard for me was that, he ended up coming with her, and then we didn't have aftercare because I had to go, and then he stayed with her for like a week after that. And it was like the whole situation created the conditions for the jealousy, right? Because we didn't talk about it beforehand, because I didn't feel necessarily super safe afterwards, right? So I think that for listeners out there, the lesson is whatever experience you're gonna have, especially if it's the first time, do talk about it, do have agreements. And yes, as sexy as it feels in the moment, as tempted as you are, don't break those, right? And take your time. So I really love that. And also what you mentioned about going to workshops, and I know not everyone has the exposure to those things. Definitely New York is one of the places that has the most, but there's so much stuff online, right? Like,
Yes,
I have a Patreon, there's our podcasts, there's workshops and things you can buy, and there's books. There's so much that you can do to research before even doing anything. And actually the couple that I interviewed this week as well, I think they spent like a year, just going to workshops and learning about it before even doing anything, right? And not
Yes.
necessarily that that's a way to do it, but I definitely think that it's important to inform yourself and go to community events and meet other non-monogamous people. And all of those things that you mentioned sounds like you were going at it the right way from the very beginning.
Well, the aftercare piece is super important that you mentioned just then, because I remember the first time I ever went on a solo date, just the logistics of that was I went on the solo date, I think, on the Friday night, and it was kind of a big deal for us because Abby had been solo dating for probably maybe a year before that. And
couple of years.
yeah, a couple of years. And so it had come time where we all felt comfortable, and Abby and myself felt comfortable with me going on a solo date. And so I remember it was up in Harlem and we were in Brooklyn. And so there was this huge commute to get to and from the date. And the next morning, on the Saturday morning, I was driving out of town, out of New York, to go away for a few days for work. And so we didn't really factor in the importance of the aftercare after that first initial solo date. So because it was so far uptown, it took me, at 2:00 in the morning, it took me like 2 hours to get home. So by the time I got home, I was wrecked.
I mean, you should have just got an Uber, and I said that to you.
Yeah.
Get the Uber.
I was like, no, I'll battle through the subway, doing all the line changes.
Ubers are expensive from Harlem to Brooklyn, but yes, but he should have taken the Uber.
Oh, totally. But then I went away, and then the issue was that we weren't able to kind of reconnect after that very, big experience for us.
Yeah, because I was feeling really good when you were on the date. I felt good sort of immediately after, but then it was those days afterwards I was spiraling. And I think also I was at home, I think all that weekend with our baby, because we had a baby then, and we were just sort of in this different, you were away for days, I was with the baby, and then I was like, oh no, like, are you like falling in love with her? Like I just sort of went a bit mad or something internally.
Yeah.
And I was busy, so
you couldn't comfort me.
Yeah, I couldn't comfort you because I was kind of out of the ability to contact you. So it was almost like the worst case scenario of aftercare.
Yeah. A lesson.
Yeah.
That was a lesson.
Right, right. Because aftercare is not just after you have kinky sex or after you have a threesome or anything like that. It's also after your partner goes on a date, right? Like, what are you
Yeah.
doing to connect before and after? And that's also really important. That's so interesting that you started dating separately as you had your kid. How did that conversation come about? Sounds like you were doing things together for about 2 years. I don't know if there were any kind of hiccups during that process, but sounds like because you are naturally compersive, because you would talk about the experiences before and after, because you respected your boundaries, whatever. Like it seems like that went easier. Sounds
Mm.
like. Am I getting that right? And then how did the idea of dating separately come about?
Well, that came about because Liam and I were having different experiences of compersion. So Liam, I would say, at that point, and perhaps now, like you just have like Liam has a very very compersive, very comfortable, and it just felt like you were very into me dating separately if that was something that I wanted to do. You were like, if you want to do that, that's great, and like actually, I find it really hot. Like that's
Yeah, like
and
he
I
has a little bit of a hot wifing kink, I
yeah,
guess.
hot wifing kink. So it was like sort of in that realm. So that sort of made it more available to us. But we've never tried to have like a balanced situation. It's like just because Liam is more comfortable with that doesn't mean that I need to then say, okay, well, that's what I get to do. So then you get to do that too. We've just never really taken that on. So, and Liam was very comfortable. He was like, look, I feel really comfortable with you dating. And if you're not comfortable with me dating, that's totally fine. And if you're not comfortable with it, I'm not really particularly drawn to it. So it felt very easy for us to navigate that. And we were still having shared experiences together as well. And then it was years later, I broached it. I was like, you know what, actually, I feel ready. I feel excited. And I guess I also have some like hot husbanding fetishes,
husband
tendencies.
kink.
Yeah, I find it really hot as well. But I can get a little bit more insecure with Liam, or things can tip me. So it just took me a little bit of time to be like, yeah, I'm actually really on board. And then I think it also came down to the right sort of person and circumstance. And so then it felt like a really positive thing.
Yeah, and it did feel really positive. Also because it wasn't rushed, and because it came from a very genuine place. I think at the very beginning, when we broached Abby going on solo dates, I was extremely comfortable with that. I felt super secure in our relationship. I was, as you said, super turned on by it. And at that time, I didn't feel like going on solo dates myself. We were having these amazing sexual experiences together with other women, and there was that interaction that was super sexually fulfilling. But I think over time, certainly that there was an interest that sparked within me, like, oh, maybe it would be really fun. Maybe I would like to feel that first date energy again. Like that would be a crazy feeling to feel whilst being married. And so over the course
Probably
of
witnessing Abby going through that as well.
Yeah, totally. And so yeah, I was really happy that we waited. And as time went on, it became a more active conversation. And I think by the time it actually came about, obviously the aftercare was we learned our lessons from that. But I think a good lesson that we learned overall was just this sense of being comfortable with there being an asymmetry in the relationship with experiences. Because if it's tit for tat and you went on a date, so I go on a date, and sometimes we see that, with non-monogamous friends and people within our community is that people are very fastidious about, well, you went on a date last week, so now it's my turn to go on a date. And if I don't go on a date, then it starts to become this kind of mental arithmetic of like, you did that, I did this, and then and I feel like that is a dangerous place to be in as a non-monogamous couple.
I think one of the things that I learned as well from my own dating, my own separate dating, the big lesson for me was that even though I was dating and I was having new relationship energy and forming connections and, having these wonderful, intense feelings, I never lost my connection to Liam, ever. If anything, I felt closer to Liam. And I think that was really important for me to have that experience over a bit of a sustained period of time to then go, well, you know, my love for Liam is not less. Like this isn't bringing a problem for us. This is actually fine. So it took this sort of unknown element out of it in a way where I was like, actually, you know, why would Liam just stop being into me and just become like obsessed with some new person that he's dating and then I'm not appealing anymore? It just, because that didn't happen, I didn't have that experience myself.
Right.
But I still got
Right.
insecure with the, you know, he was away on the weekend. So things still come up. But that was really big for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's also a reason why I think asymmetry can be good sometimes, because even if you do want to balance things out, it can actually help to move that to move in that direction. Again, not that you have to, right? Like, I mean, I'm the best example of that, right? Like Seth is monogamous and I'm non-monogamous, and he's never felt like he needs to date because I date, and I've never felt like I should be monogamous because he's not dating. And I actually do see in a lot of poly and non-monogamous circles people making that mistake, as you were saying, of like, oh, I can't date because my partner is too jealous, so then I told them that they can't date either. And it's like, well, but if your partner is more jealous but you don't feel jealousy when they date, why don't you let them date for a little bit, and maybe they'll realize that it's not just like Abby did, right? Like that is not going to detract from your relationship, and then they'll be like, actually, I think I feel okay, or like you can get there at some point if you want to or not. And there can always be an asymmetry in how you do things. And I think that's another great lesson of just being okay with things not being equal, and not letting people judge, right? Because there's a lot of judgment, right? Of like, oh, you can't date but you are letting your partner date, like how does that work? And of course, if like you really want to date and you can't, and it does feel super unfair to see your partner dating, maybe you'll be like, no, actually, I don't want them to do it. Not because I experience jealousy necessarily, but because it's still difficult for me because I cannot do it, right? Like it can also work that way. But there's 1,000 ways in which you can structure the relationship, and you just have to be honest with how you feel, and you probably will feel differently than your partner, and your triggers are going to be different than your partner's. So you just have to work around those triggers, and yeah, that often means that you have different rules, you know, and it's totally okay to do that. But yeah, I also love, Abby, that you felt even more connected to Liam. And that's also a topic that I find fascinating, because I do feel like on the one hand, non-monogamy does make you feel more connected to your partner, because you remember what new relationship energy is like, and you kind of bring it into your relationship, or because you feel grateful that your partner is allowing you to have this exploration. And I've experienced that myself. But I've also experienced feeling a little bit, maybe not disconnected, but distracted from my relationship, by, you know, being into a new person and experiencing the new relationship energy and all of that, right? But I think my relationship is different in that I don't really talk to my partner much about my dates and my experiences and all of that, right? But for you two, it's always been something that even turns you on, right? So it does bring you together every time, because you can come back and be like, I had this amazing date, this is what happened, and then, you know, have amazing sex or whatever, right? But I can't do that. So it would sometimes create a little bit of again, maybe not total disconnection, but distraction, like of like, there's like this going on in my life that I can't fully share with my partner, or I'm just like really into this new person, and my energies are here, and I'm not, you know, connected to Seth, which is, you know, one of the reasons that I've been taking a break from non-monogamy. But it's just interesting to kind of reflect on how it can work in different ways, right? Because I think generally speaking, it does make you feel more connected to your partner. And I think that that's the misconception that a lot of people have about non-monogamy, that, oh, if you do that, then that's going to affect your relationship with your partner. It usually affects it positively, right? Like most of the times, but not always. But I'm really glad to hear that for you, it always was kind of like a point of connection. It has been and is to this day a point of connection when you have experiences with other people, because you do, sounds like you do share a lot about your relationships with others, right?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do.
With each other?
Yeah, with each other, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it feels like we're both on the same team having this amazing adventure together. That's how it feels to me. And we're both creatives outside of non-monogamy as well. But I feel like being a creative person, both of us being creative people, the ultimate expression of creativity is actually our own relationship. And so it feels like this incredible project that we're both on together, that we're just constantly evolving and moving, in interesting directions. And it's just the opposite of boring. It's like the opposite of stasis for me.
Yeah.
So I think that what really feeds into that sense of this adventure is actually being able to communicate it with each other and both being open to being on the adventure together. I think is just an absolute gift. And for us and our particular relationship, it just works perfectly.
It does. It does work really well. But, of course, like any relationship, of course, we have things that we, have to navigate, and there are new experiences, and we have, we get activated by different things in different ways. Sometimes it is incredibly surprising. So, and also sitting with the reality of like many things can be true at once. Like the first time that I started separate dating was with this wonderful man who another friend of ours actually, she had been dating him a while back, and then she said, I think that you would really like him, and connected. And then it was all really wonderful. It was really positive. It was so positive for all three of us, to the point where that actually also really overwhelmed me, because looking back at that situation, it actually became pretty polyamorous very quickly. And I hadn't had, intense sort of feelings for somebody like that. I mean, obviously different. It was very different to the feelings that I had for you, Liam, but I had very almost like the addictive feelings that you have, like that really intense. And I felt very overwhelmed by that. And it did destabilize me a little bit. And I remember one day I was quite emotional, Liam. Do you remember?
Yeah,
I was I had tears in my eyes because I had these big feelings for this new person, and it was scaring the crap out of me, because I think perhaps it was, any other time when I'd had big feelings like that, that usually means that's the beginning of something really profound. But then thinking about how does that fit in with our relationship? And of course, things simmered down and everything was fine, but you held that so well in a way that I don't think I would have been able to hold. If Liam came to me and was like, I'm so overwhelmed because I'm so into this new woman, I think I would have just passed out.
I remember that being, we had a lot of conversations around that time, I think, because Abbie did feel these overwhelming feelings towards this guy, and I was also navigating how I felt about Abbie having those feelings, and it definitely wasn't easy. And whilst I did hold the space, I had to do a lot of processing, and there's a lot of kind of unpacking of these traditional tropes of masculinity where we're taught to really protect your partner, and you've got to fight for your partner, and anyone who's a potential trespasser on that kind of relationship, you have to almost go into overdrive to kind of protect it. And so I started to grapple with some of those things. It's like, am I being a good partner by letting this kind of happen, or like witnessing this happen and not trying to change it? And so, I had to have those kind of deep kind of philosophical conversations with myself in order to then get to a space where I was able to kind of hold space for you and the intense things. And I also love the dude as well. Like he's the nicest guy. And so I was like, oh, I don't want that to end. And he's awesome. And like, we have a great time all hanging out. This is kind of the perfect situation, but this is like very intense very quickly.
I'd be curious to hear, Liam, and I think I might have asked something similar last time as well, but I'm really impressed by how you really analyze that toxic masculinity or patriarchal culture, or however we want to call it, and you kind of recognize your hesitations around letting Abbie have this experience with another man, having to do with these ideas of having to protect your woman or whatever, right? So any advice for men that might be struggling with that? Like, what did you do? I know that you said something like, I had philosophical conversations with myself, but I mean, I don't know if everyone can do that. So do you have any advice for other men that might be struggling with that? For example, with the one penis policy, right? Like they're totally fine if their woman dates other women, right? But if it's a man, then they have an insecurity. And I don't know if you've experienced that, but that's the kind of thing that they might recognize. Oh, this is obviously sexist, but
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that I can change how I feel. You know what I mean?
Mm.
If you want to listen to the answer to this question, you can head on to my Patreon, where I have a very interesting conversation with Abbey and Liam on toxic masculinity and how to overcome it. And if you decide to subscribe, you'll get access to a lot more bonus content from Polycurious, as well as the recording from my meetups on different topics and solo episodes where I give advice and talk about my personal experiences. So go ahead and check that out by following the link in the show notes. And once you subscribe, you can come back and listen to the rest of this episode. Going back to your story, so sounds like this relationship kind of, as it happens to all of us, the new relationship energy was overwhelming, but then eventually this person moved away, so it kind of naturally faded a little bit, right? But how have you evolved from there? Have you still had those like overwhelming new relationship energy experiences? And obviously the first one is always the toughest one, because as you were saying, Abby, you then start kind of questioning, like, is there space in my life for this person? I remember what happened to me the first time. I would think about, oh, what if I want to go on trips with this person? And that wasn't something that I was okay with at the time. And then, it's funny. I'm talking about a person that maybe I met 2 times, you know what I mean? But like when you're in that like new relationship energy, you're just like, oh my God, like I want all the things. And then you start having anxiety of like, can I have this in my life with my current relationship? And then it becomes like overwhelming and difficult, which sounds like what you were experiencing. But how have your experiences been since, as you, I'm sure, or well, I'm not sure, but I would imagine maybe you have again fallen in love with someone else. How has that evolved?
Yeah. So I would say there's still been intensity for other men that I've dated the years, but I would say that I just have a bit more of an understanding of myself, and I know what's going to happen. Like I know that if I meet someone and we've, over the years we've had connections and there have been those feelings, there's been that strong level of attraction there, I know that when I start sleeping with somebody, I get the feels. And it's like, that's just that thing that's going to happen. And there are those, all of those feelings that come up. But I'd say that I'm just a bit more grounded in myself. And I think that comes from experience. And I think it also comes from the stage of life that I'm in. So when I was first seeing that first that I had, where it was very intense, I was also we were at a point in our lives where it was actually completely okay to get really swept up in that in like a pretty intense way, because I had some more time. I wasn't a mum at that point, and there was just like more time to like relish in the deliciousness of all of that new relationship energy. And I would say that now, I'm a mum now, like we have a 7-year-old. And so life, whilst there are those big crushes and things that happen, it's like when I'm home, when I'm with my family, when I'm in that role, I can't help but I get pulled back into my family life in this sort of intense way. So, which is the way that it needs to be.
How about on the other side? So when Liam has fallen for someone else, if it has happened, because it sounds like, generally speaking, even though you also have a little bit of that hot husbanding kink,
Hot husbanding. What a term.
whatever you said, maybe sounds like maybe it's a little bit easier for Liam, generally speaking. Like sounds like you experience jealousy maybe a little bit more than Liam, even though you're also super compersive. So how was it when Liam went through that, if that has ever happened?
Yeah, so I'm not sure I don't think, to my knowledge, that you have actually like really fallen in like love with somebody. And I think that would probably be a little bit trickier for me to navigate. But in saying that, you're a very loving person, and there have been and there have been a couple of people. There's one partner in particular that I think of where you have had a really strong, she's actually monogamous now with another partner. So we're more in the friendship space with her. But, you know, you had really strong feelings for her. I also have a love for her, like as a, like a, not a romantic love, but like a sisterhood love. And I feel so strongly towards her in the sense that, like, I feel so comfortable with her. I adore her so much. And I love the connection that you and her had. You know, that was almost to the point where I said to Liam, you know, if something were to ever happen to me, I actually feel really comfortable if you were one day going to like repartner, you know, like if something, you know, God forbid. Like it got dark, but to me, that was me showing how much I adored her, how much I care for her. I was like, I actually could see her, you know, like if something happened, she could be there, you know, like I love how she is with our son, like just things like that. And I think, Liam, you got really emotional. You were like, why are you talking about this? Stop it.
I mean, like, you're talking about it now.
I know, but
like
I know, of course you don't like it. It's a hypothetical, but I'm saying that I
see your point.
That's a conversation. It's like I wouldn't have had that conversation years ago. That's like not, it's like would have been illegal for someone to be that close to us where I would feel that that could ever be a possibility.
Generally speaking, I think what you're saying is when I know the person, which, you know, we've talked about before, right? Because you didn't know me when Liam and I went on a date. But yeah, when you know the person, it's a lot easier for you, you know. And I think it's like really interesting to talk to you guys because I do see you as a super strong couple, super healthy. And I also see my relationship with Seth that way, right? And we have completely different approaches to non-monogamy, right? So I love it because I want to show people that there's many ways of doing it and it depends on your personality, right? And you guys are very compersive, and I actually wanted to ask you about that because I don't want people to hear you and be like, why can I not you know, get aroused about my partner being with other people, or just be happy about my partner being with other people and supportive and all of those things. So I guess you might not have the answer to this, but do you have any idea of where that compersion comes from or how to cultivate it if people don't have it? Also, again, knowing that it's totally okay if you don't experience it, and you can still have a healthy relationship that will look totally different from your relationship. But I imagine some people might be like, man, I wish I could share everything with my partner and be so compersive, and not everyone can do that. So any thoughts around the topic of compersion?
I think kind of back to we've had Dr. Marie Tuin on our podcast a few times, and she wrote this incredible book called What is Compersion? And that's a great resource that I would recommend for people. But when we've discussed it with her, we've talked about whether compersion is almost like a muscle that you can kind of work on. It's like go to the gym for your compersion. And I wonder about that because I have always felt very naturally compersive, and that is a feeling that I have felt instinctually in an embodied sense, as well as in a theoretical sense. And I think initially when I started seeing other people as well and going on solo dates, Abbey also felt compersion, but it was more of the heady compersion of like, I like that you're having a great experience, and you're feeling, you know, there was a lot of other things kind of competing at the same time. So in terms of like building, you know, in terms of trying to build and nurture compersion, I think that the best way to do that is just by feeling super secure and safe within your relationship to express how you're feeling, and kind of creating the foundations where, you know, those honest and very real conversations can happen. Because if you don't have that foundational aspect, it's very difficult to express that, oh, actually, I am excited for you to go on a date. I am excited for you to see this guy or go to a sex party and watch you with other people. If you feel that there might be a kind of a resistance to that, or maybe, you know, kind of a different experience that the partner might have. So, yeah, I guess that's where my mind goes.
I would say that my compersion, mostly, I think it's quite a selfish compersion. It's like I feel compersive for, like, I have compersion for your experiences, if I am like feeling some kind of arousal or like, there's some kind of gratification that I'm like getting from this situation. I think that's kind
So for
of
you, it's
like,
more sexual.
for me, it's been more sexual, as where I will feel compersion, like when it's like more of a, just say if you're going bouldering with someone or you're going for a walk with someone, I feel more neutral about that.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm like, oh, I'm upset about it or it's a bad thing. I'm happy about it in the sense that like, I'm happy that you're happy, but I'm not like having this, like, I'm not like, oh my gosh. And then what did you two talk about next with the blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Like if it's something like really interesting, like if
And
it's
Liam
something,
is more like that.
yeah, or like,
I'm kind of everything. I would say that I'm
everything.
I'd say that I love all of the aspects of it. Like, and this is what I mean by just being naturally very compersive. And it's a difficult thing, it's hard to talk about it because it seems like I'm almost exaggerating the levels of compersion I feel. It's like I'm missing a little part of my brain that stops me from being compersive, It's like
Liam's like, if I'm chatting with someone or like, dating someone, Liam's like, oh my gosh, can you two, what if you go on a little holiday together?
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? Like,
Yeah.
when am I going on this holiday? Like, for how long? Liam's like, I don't know. Like, it doesn't have to be 2 or 3 nights. Like, you could go here, something like you're sort of like that, as where I probably wouldn't be like, like, oh, you should go on this like holiday with another woman. Like, it's just not something that like I wouldn't sort of go to it in that way. But my compersion's also, I feel like it's a little bit, gets a bit weird. Like so when you talk about as a muscle, so like, something to build, it's like okay, if we're going to get a little bit explicit here, like I do when I'm like alone by myself and I'm having my own,
paint us a
like
picture.
my own time where I'm, I'm with myself or whatever.
Okay.
It's very compersion led. Like I really enjoy imagining you with another woman. And then my compersion is not always what I would want it to be in reality. So like I have these fantasies where like, I'm at home, whatever, being sweet, baking, being like a cute, I don't know, like being a mom, like whatever. And you're like out at work, but then you like have a mistress and you like drop in on her and have like a little affair on the way home. And I don't know anything about it. Okay. But it's like, that's like, I find that like that sort of thing really turns me on. So I have a lot of compersion for that, but like, I don't know how that kind of translates to the real world.
Oh, you would love it.
So it's like very layered. It's like there's compersion sort of, at varying levels, different situations. But I do, when you're dating somebody, I want you to be happy. And what I love about you dating, the compersion that I have, and maybe this is, again, it makes it selfish, is that when you come home after being on a date, you're like really happy.
So happy. Which
then makes me feel really good. You also give me a lot of attention. Like, not that you don't give me attention, but it's like you have this sort of like, hi, like, how are you? What have you been doing? I love you. And like, it's like you have this, I think maybe because I can be a bit more insecure, you sort of like, so I enjoy that. It's like, oh, I get a little more like attention.
So is the moral of the story that I need to get a mistress? Is that the
No.
Oh, okay.
No, don't like have an affair. Like that's not it. But but also, it's complicated.
But also another thing as well is that you can't gaslight yourself into being compersive.
No.
Because I see that sometimes of people being like, I am compersive, I'm into this. But ultimately, it's got to come from a very real place of genuinely being compersive. You can't kind of intellectualize your way into an embodied sense of compersion. You can't be saying that you're feeling physically compersive in a situation when you actually genuinely don't feel that way, in the hope that your body will catch up to what your mouth is saying.
Well, I think that we're talking about 3 different things, right? It's interesting. There's like, you called it physical compersion, but I would call it arousal, like the hot wife or hot husband or whatever it is, the erotic compersion, right? And then there's the kind of conceptual compersion of the concept of you being happy makes me happy, but that doesn't mean that the third type of compersion, which is not sexual nor conceptual, which is like you come back from a date and I'm like, oh, I'm so happy that you had a great date,
Yeah.
right? Like that's another type of compersion, right? So I think there's, there's many different types we're talking about, but I guess I also want people to know again that if you don't feel, well, I guess you should at least feel the conceptual one, right? Like you should want your partner to be happy.
Yeah.
But if you don't feel the other two, I think most people don't, right? And as Liam was saying, like you can't like force yourself into feeling that if it doesn't come naturally to you. You can experiment with it, right? Like you can fantasize about it or things like that and see, and you might realize that maybe you didn't allow yourself to be aroused by that, but it does make you aroused. But yeah, without necessarily forcing it. So yeah, but thank you for explaining how that all works for you. I find it super interesting. So tell me, where are you guys now in your journey? Do you have any partners? I know, as you said, after you had your kid, you're still non-monogamous and everything, but you don't have the same type of availability to be drowning in new relationship energy or whatever I'm doing, now that I don't have a child. But yeah, how are things now, and how has your relationship evolved since, those first times that we were just talking about?
Well, I'm about to go looking for a mistress. I think. That's what I've been learning from this conversation. Now, yeah, I think things have definitely evolved, and we're at a place now where we're very aware of the sense that we can be very specific about how connections can be totally different depending on the person, and we're not thinking about labels in terms of, oh, we're polyamorous, so we've got to do exactly what it says on the tin for polyamory, or we've got to do exactly what it says on the tin for swinging, or whatever it might be. And I think at the moment, all of the connections that we have are incredibly intentional, which is amazing. And we have very different kind of ways in which we approach those relationships. So you know,
well, I would say that you're feeling a little bit of like you're
NRE?
feeling a bit NRE
yeah,
at the
I
moment.
got a little situation.
Well,
happening.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I haven't met her, but we have a little group chat going, and she's
super cool.
Yeah. I would say, like where I'm at, when I'm dating people, I tend to like, if I like someone and we're dating and they like me and we have a connection and it works, it'll be a very like long-term thing for me. So like I have been seeing one person for quite a long time, for like 5 years, and he lives interstate.
Oh, wow.
But there have been times where like he has gone and been in a monogamous relationship. So our connection really sort of has to go quiet for that time, completely out of respect for that. And it's really interesting because it's that kind of dynamic with him. We don't really maintain a friendship when there are those periods of monogamy. There's just like this understanding because we don't really have – we have a lovership. We have like an erotic connection, and I don't think it's like appropriate for us to be friends if he is going through that monogamous relationship. So, then they broke up and then we reconnected again. And it's looking like monogamy is on the cards for him again now. Sort of reading the room. From like messages that we've had. So, and that's an interesting place to be in because, I have so much in my life already with, Liam and our son and, friendships and then other lovers as well. And that's just an example, but this is sort of an example of like, I need to have that strong base in myself, that stability because, things can happen and things can change. And I think, I've never sort of had the belief of like, okay, well, he's gone monogamous, so like boo to him, I'm like rejected or anything, because it's actually not about me being rejected. It's the circumstances. And, I can't offer a big commitment love in the way that, he would is ultimately probably looking for. And he's not looking for that within me, has never tried to, is very respectful and understands the situation. And then just, I would say that I don't have like I don't have another sort of intense like polyamorous partner, you know, at the moment, but I have other lovers, but there is more of a friendship there with them too. So it's sort of in that gray area of like, it's not casual. It's not a casual situation. It's ongoing, and there is a care and an eroticism and a closeness. But there's not that sort of anchoring into each other's lives, you know, in the way that I am with Liam, or like needing to check in every day. You know, like I don't feel like I need to, you know, I'm not sort of beholden to other people, or like if I'm dating somebody, but then if I like to connect with somebody else, I don't feel like I need to, like, I don't have to like tell them in the way that they don't have to tell me. There's autonomy, and I think that's really important. And over the years, we've had situations where, you know, I did, you know, a number of years ago, I did date somebody who was comfortable with me being with Liam, but he wasn't comfortable with me then dating other people. And that was a real learning experience, because by that stage, when that started to present itself, I was very, you know, I was very connected with him. I was very attached to him, and I really had to like reconcile where I was at with that, because ultimately his sort of boundaries around my relationship with him was impacting my marriage, because Liam and I are very open, and we also like to have experiences together and have this playful element, and that impacted too much on my marriage. There was sort of rules
because you
coming
couldn't
in.
have a threesome if you wanted, or
Totally.
whatever, right?
Totally. So I'm anything that's, I need to keep my autonomy, and I need to be able to, my main connection here is with Liam. Like it would be very different if there was a Liam for some reason was like, can you not date people at the moment because I'm going through something, or there's some sort of external thing. That's like very different. But having another partner, sort of, I let him into the point where he felt comfortable sort of putting parameters around me. And that was a real learning experience. So it's really the balance of closeness and freedom with other partners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up, because I actually went through the same with my secondary partner. And that's basically the reason why we broke up, because there came a point where I realized I wanted my autonomy. One of the reasons, I think there were a couple, and you know, he was okay with me not telling him to a point, but he wanted to know if he knew the person. And I just felt like restricted, right? And I just felt like this is something that I would totally do for Seth, but Seth is not even asking me that, you know what I mean? Seth, let me do whatever I want. And then there's this other person that I felt, even though I'm sure he doesn't, you know, he wouldn't agree with this, but I felt like he was restricting me, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. For sure.
Yeah. Cool. And then Liam, you sound like you have an NRE connection right now.
Yeah.
Are we leaving it at that, or
the phone's buzzing?
Give us more details?
The phone is buzzing, which is lovely. Yeah, we've gone on a date. Second date is in the works. I mean, one thing that is difficult about Australia is that all the cities are very far apart. It's not like America, where it's like, you know, things are a little bit closer together, or certainly Europe. And so, you know, oftentimes our connections that we have with other people are in different cities, not necessarily in Canberra, which is like where we live is a very small place. You know, Field, you could probably swipe, you know, for about 1 minute, and then you've exhausted all the people that are in the dating pool of at least non-monogamy within Field in Canberra. So, it's kind of limited, I think, a little bit, the NRE, and maybe heightened by the distance between us, because it means that we have to wait. So it's kind of logistics dependent is when the second date is going to happen, which is a common theme, it seems. Fair.
Anticipation.
Cool. Yeah, well, I hope she doesn't have to wait, 5 years like like I am waiting for that second date. But so generally speaking, sounds like your connections are friends with benefits, like between friends with benefits and partnership.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, last question for you guys. I usually end my interviews asking, what would you tell to a polycurious person? So basically, any last words of wisdom that you might have when someone, might come up to you and say, I just discovered non-monogamy. Like, what should I know? Or what do you wish that you knew when you started your own journey?
I think that my advice is follow what feels good, listen to other people's stories, be curious about what stories of other people connect with you and why, and follow those feel good feelings. Don't get too caught up in like all of the fear-based things straight away. Know the like what excites you, and then seek some guidance along the way. And of course, listen to, polycurious podcasts, different podcasts that are happening. There's
Your
a lot
podcast.
of we have the podcast too, Evolving Love. But be open, listen, talk, and if you're already in a partnership with somebody, a monogamous partnership, and you're thinking of opening up, it's really fun to talk in hypotheticals. Where it's not like this is what I want. It's like how would you feel if, not saying that I want that, but how would you feel if? Because I think always anything that sparks a conversation and a new train of thought can be a really positive thing.
Yeah, because so many things can happen, right? And I think, as you said, also learning from other people's experiences. And I think a great way of doing that is listening to podcasts, but also reading your writing, Abby, which I will make sure to link in the show notes, as well as your podcast, because you write really honestly about your experience, including, the experience that we had about you vetoing me and all of that. So I'll also add that to the show notes as well, if people want to check it out.
One of my big regrets, but that's okay.
No, I think honestly, I love all the content that has come out of it. So I think it has some good things, and also the anticipation, So it's all good. But I really recommend people to check your writing out and your podcast. And of course, if they're in Australia, go to your retreats and your conversation nights and all of that. But Liam, what would you tell to a polycurious person?
Well, probably two things. I double down on the idea that it's not a race, and you should take a breath, because initially everything in non-monogamy is so exciting. It feels like you're in a wonderland, in a candy store, and it's so tempting to kind of jump into things with your partner at a million miles an hour. But I would say take a breath, have discussions, know that if you're in a great relationship, you'll be able to kind of explore these things as time moves on, and it allows you to kind of be very considered. The other thing kind of touches on yours is to be very careful about the different advice that you're seeking from people and online, and to be very deliberate about who you're sharing it with, and making sure that people are coming to you without a sense of judgment, without a sense of kind of fear-based, this is what you could lose, this is the right way to do this. And especially when people start gravitating, because naturally, as curious, anyone interested in non-monogamy is naturally curious. You're going to go online, you're going to see different things. There's amazing resources like all the stuff that you do, Fair, obviously. But it's very important to not get sucked into the rabbit hole and the algorithm of people who are very negative about certain types of ways people open relate. Because as we've talked about during this whole conversation, is there's so many different ways to have a beautiful relationship that is respectful and explorative and adventurous. And you should make sure that you're not putting yourself into a box that is an unhealthy box just because you happen to, find a particular person's Instagram account and they say, if you engage in anything hierarchical, then you're the devil. I think you have to be very mindful of the resources that you're consuming and the communities that you're becoming involved with. You want to be surrounded by healthy people who are interested in growth, who are interested in nuance, and who give people grace if they make mistakes. I think it's really important to surround yourself with great community.
Yeah, I love that. And I think we touched on a couple of those ways in which you might do non-monogamy differently from the online discourse, right? The being hierarchical can be fine. And there's ethical hierarchy and unethical
Yeah.
hierarchy, as well as ethical and unethical, like non-hierarchy, right? Like it all depends on how you do it, and asymmetry, right? Like your partner can do one thing, you can do a different thing, you can have different rules. So that's really what I'm all about with Polycurious, and I really appreciate that you guys are also like that, of not being like, this is right, this is wrong, and just being like, okay, tune in with yourself. What works for you? As Abby said, what feels good in your body, even,
Yes.
and as long as your partner is being respected and listened to, and you feel respected and listened to, and it's a safe environment, it doesn't have to look any specific way, right? So I really love that message. Well, guys, thank you so much. I feel like, we could have a part 3, part 4, part 5. We'll probably will. But yeah, thank you so much for thank you so much for sharing everything that you shared today, and I'm so excited for people to listen to this episode.
Thank you so much for having us. A pleasure as always talking to you.